Once you've got your bridal party selected, the next step will be to create a rough draft of your guest list. Now, brace yourself because this part is typically one of the most stressful parts when planning a wedding. If you're like most people planning a wedding, you'd love to have everyone who's important be there, but that can get really expensive. Even just going with friends and family can get out of hand real quick. You're gonna feel like you're offending those people who aren't able to make it onto that list, but I've got news for you. It's just a wedding. They're still gonna be super happy and will understand why you kept things small. You need to be able to work within your budget and your comfort zone. Speaking of budget, remember when we mentioned that catering tab in the budget calculator? Well, pull that up and take a look at it. Depending on what you listed as your total wedding budget will in turn determine your catering budget. So if we then click on the catering tab of your budget calculator, you can see this budget broken down into its low end and high end estimates. Now, here's where you need to do your research. With each of these potential catering options, take their estimated cost per plate range and plug it into that catering calculator. So let's say I found a caterer that is quoting me a cost per plate of $50 to $55. I'll plug that into the range of the calculator and hit enter. This will then give me a breakdown of how many guests I can accommodate within this budget, both on the low and the high end range. From here, I can determine if this aligns with my guest list. Remember though, you need to include your vendors in this count as well. So if after doing that calculation, you find that your guest accommodation range is much higher than your guest list, then great, you can choose to build a fancier menu or otherwise move that budget to a different area. But if your guest accommodation range is lower than your guest list, then you need to make a decision. You can either trim away that guest list, lower your cost per plate range by having a less fancy menu, or pull in some more budget from somewhere else. Whatever you decide on is your call, but at least with this calculator, you'll stay more informed. So let's jump back into that planner and dedicate a few pages to the guest list. Now this is gonna be your first draft of the guest list, and for this, I want you to write down everyone you would love to have at your wedding if price was no option. List your family, all your cousins, your friends, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, everyone who you might want to be there, and leave plenty of space because this list will probably continue to grow once you realize you've forgotten someone. I personally love using Excel or Google Sheets for this part because it gives you the option of staying organized when you're entering these details in. You'll also save yourself a step when it comes to importing your guest list for making your wedding invitations. We do this just to get a visual of how many people you might potentially have on the big day. So once you think you've got everyone accounted for, total them up and write that number up at the top. If you're like most of us, this list is probably sitting somewhere between like 130 to 250 people. Don't worry, we're gonna consolidate that. Now that you've got that number, I want you to assign $100 to the total number of guests. Does that make you want to throw up? Good. I want you to write that number next to the guest count. That is the average cost per person for the average wedding. This is where you and your partner need to have a serious conversation about what's more important. Do you want to have a more exclusive wedding with a smaller number of people and a fancier setup? Or would you rather have a more simplified but inclusive experience for all of these guests? The important question you need to ask yourself is, can you really connect with 200 wedding guests over a few hours celebration? Or would you be better off celebrating with a more manageable number? Also keep in mind that the number of guests you decide on is going to drastically adjust the budget for food, beverages, party favors, invitations, and pretty much every other detail and aspect of your day. Food alone is going to be one of the largest expenses at your wedding. So now I want you to take that same number of guests and multiply it by $40. This new, much more digestible number is what it would cost for you to have that very inclusive guest count, but at a much more basic wedding. The food options will be limited, the decor is gonna be less fancy, tables, favors, all that, more affordable, but ultimately still very possible. So now we know how much it's gonna cost to host your inclusive wedding, whether it be on the low end or the high end. Let's do the same thing, but with a consolidated guest list. Now I want you to create a second version of your guest list. This time only including the people who you consider to be a necessity. I'm talking about your immediate family, your best friends, anyone else who you're gonna have there without a doubt. So once you've got that total, write that up at the top and repeat your math. Multiply that number by $100 per guest and $40 per guest. Now, more often than not, this ends up being the list that most people decide on. Then depending on where you're at in the budget, you can then begin to add a few people here and there from the first list until you reach a point of equilibrium between inclusiveness and affordability. If you do your number crunching correctly, the total cost should be close to what you set aside when you first created your budget in the column for food and beverage, which is 20 to 26% of your total budget. Now keep in mind that that's for everything food and drink related. So catering, the bar, the wedding cake, desserts, and the staff to run everything. So let's do an example. If we use the same example we used before of $20,000 budget, we're doing the 20 to 26% for your food and beverage. That means that you should be sitting around $5,200 total if we're using all that budget. Now, if I take that same evaluation I had before at $50 to $55 cost per plate, I'm looking at about 65 to 72 guests, depending on how fancy I want to go. Now, this also gives me some wiggle room because I do have some surplus budget available, and I've already factored in a separate budget for my decor and any guest party favors. Now, if you're off budget, head back to that list and see where you can make some cuts. In one of the next videos, we'll be going over the benefits and setbacks of doing a plated dinner versus a buffet style dinner. We actually dedicate 3 videos just to designing the menu and your food, so don't worry, we're gonna cover everything. Depending on which one of these you choose though, can also help make things very affordable and allow for more flexibility in the guest list. And if you want to use that budget calculator I was using, you can find that right in the resources listed down below. Just be easy on yourself because this part is going to take some time and will likely be frustrating, okay? Nobody's good at math, and if they are, they're weird. Stay away from them. We don't talk about those people. If you have any questions about what we covered in this video, please post those right in the private Facebook group, and feel free to tag one of us if you need help with any of this. You can also email us directly with any personal questions at support@wedeverything.com. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget that you can subscribe to our channel right here, and we will see you in the next video.